Greetings. My name is Gerardo Familiar from UNAM's Extension School in Canada, and it is with great pleasure that I address you today. Our sister institution, UNAM's Extension School in Chicago, along with UNAM's Research Center on North America, CISAN, have been hosting a series of roundtables to reflect on the bicentennial of diplomatic relations between Mexico and the United States. However, the said relationship cannot be fully understood if a key player is left out, Canada. Therefore, today's panel is an invitation to reflect on Canada's view on the trilateral relationship that has been in place for over 25 years in North America. To that end, we had planned to have two very special guests. Unfortunately, and this kind of situations happen, and we need to be ready to expect these situations. One of our guests is having some difficulties connecting to the call. So we'll just go ahead and ask our second guest to present what he had prepared for us today until we give our first guest some time to connect. Alberto Focerrada is one of our guests. Since 2020, he's the head of cultural and interinstitutional affairs at UNAM Chicago. With more than 15 years of experience as a diplomat working for the Mexican embassies in Washington, D.C., as a liaison with the U.S. Congress, and in Canada in the Office for International Cooperation. He worked for the Mexican consulate in Chicago, where he founded the Office of Political Affairs in 2007. He has also worked for the Ministry of Economy as a liaison with Congress and with the Tourism Ministry. He was a member of the board of the U.S.-Mexico Business Association in Chicago. He studied international relations and has a master's degree in public policy from the University of London. Without further ado, I pass the floor to Alberto.
Thank you very much, Gerardo. I really appreciate your introduction. And, you know, I just got a call from Colin Robertson, and this is live. He just announced to me in a very, very respite voice that he got COVID. And he tried to get a hold of me, and for some reason he couldn't, but we wish him the best. And, well, he'll hopefully join us some other time. Well, but as they say, you know, the show must go on. And here's what I'm going to say a little bit on my what I thought about this topic. First of all, I want to thank you very much, Gerardo, and congratulations on the wonderful work you're doing from UNAM Canada. I think we did great things when we worked together a few years ago. You know, my take on this important issue comes from the perspective of someone who worked in Canada for 5.5 years. By no means I would consider myself a Canadian expert, and for that I would refer our audience to the literature that you can find in UNAM. I absolutely recommend the 2 volumes published by the Center for Research on North America, entitled Canada and Its Paradoxes in the 21st Century, edited by Oliver Santin Peña, with outstanding researchers and scholars such as Teresina Gutierrez Aces, Kirk Dalhousie, Marcela Lopez Vallejo, Kevin Spooner, Maria Cristina Fernandez, David Rocha, and many others, and of course, our very own Graciela Martinez Salsi, the director of CISAN and an expert on Canadian affairs herself. First of all, let me say that I was extremely honored to share this stage with Colin Robertson, who's not here, but you know, he's in spirit at least. Colin and I met in 2013 when I was invited by Ambassador Francisco Suarez Davila to head the Office of International Cooperation. Ambassador Francisco Suarez Davila, who was an UNAM alumni himself and a mutual friend of Colin and I, he formalized a very creative and innovative way of conducting diplomacy. I would call it some sort of basement diplomacy. Why basement diplomacy, you may ask? Well, you know, because the brewing of this diplomatic type was actually taking place in the basement of the ambassador's residence, where the whole staff of the embassy would gather to discuss issues at hand in the bilateral relationship between Mexico and Canada, as well as the trilateral relationship among the North American partners. These issues would range from agriculture to free trade to the visas imposed on Mexicans by the Harper government, to farm workers' conditions in the field, to academic and cultural exchanges, and even to our intent back then to relocate the Mexican embassy in a building that was just in front of Parliament, a building that used to be the former US Embassy, an effort that had succumbed because of the attack perpetrated by a gunman, unfortunately. During these gatherings, each member of the embassy staff would have a 15 to 20-minute conversation with the ambassador in front of the rest of the team, and sometimes their spouses, about the issues they were working on in their particular field. Then the ambassador would open the floor for Q&A. This was a great exercise to prepare ourselves with a comprehensive basic knowledge on how to talk to our Canadian counterparts on different subjects without getting into too much depth. It was a good basic set of tools. It allowed for a better knowledge of the multiplicity of issues regarding the Canada-Mexico relationship and provided us with much more confidence to deal with the world out there and make the case for the Mexican view on different subject matters. Now, let me share with our audience a little bit about how I met Colin Robertson, because this is relevant to our discussion regarding the title of this particular dialogue, which is The Vision of Canada on the Trilateral Relationship. I had just arrived in Ottawa and was pretty new to the city, to the whole system, to the way Canadians operate on a daily basis. The Canadian Foreign Service has this exercise where they put together a very comprehensive package of information for newly arrived diplomats to Canada. They range from talks about the Canadian political system, how the parliament works, the structure of government, and even a social component where actually Colin Robertson's wife, Maureen, used to play a very important role in promoting networking events, not just for diplomats, but for their families too. Colin was one of the main speakers at this Introduction to Canada event held at Carleton University, if I'm not mistaken. If I recall, he had just given a very comprehensive talk on the Canadian political system and Canada's international stand in the world. During coffee break, instead of mingling with my newly arrived colleagues from other embassies, I approached Colin to introduce myself. And boy, was that the first smart move I made during my arrival to Canada. From that day onward, Colin and I spoke on a regular basis. Sometimes before even having my first sip of coffee in the morning, I would turn on my computer and the first thing I would see would be an email from Colin Robertson, where he would lay out with a surgeon's precision the names of people I must meet or that I should introduce to our newly appointed ambassador. Same exercise was repeated each time we changed ambassadors, which was quite often during those years. In 5.5 years that I lived in Canada, we had 3 ambassadors, which is not very usual and probably not very useful. We are actually in the midst of having a new ambassador in the upcoming days, as Ambassador Juan José Gómez Camacho retires from the Foreign Services, from the Foreign Service to join the ranks of academia at Johns Hopkins University. Colin Robertson knows the importance of waking up early and seizing the moment. Soon he became one of our most important allies. I can honestly say that he gave new meaning to the word networking. And I know that for diplomats, networking is a must, a fundamental skill that they must possess. And all I can say is that having the chance to watch him closely, Colin Robertson made networking into an art form. Personal contacts are a main ingredient on how to approach issues, and I know that Colin is a champion in that field. I was very fortunate, and it made my job a lot easier to get the input from someone that knew by name every stakeholder in town, regardless of the issues of their party affiliation. Whether it was someone from the media, a conservative or a liberal, a member of parliament, an academic, and even people with totally opposite views from those of Colin Robertson. When we talk of a vision When we talk of a vision of Canada on the trilateral relationship, I believe we're being a little constrained by the title of this particular dialogue. I believe there's no such thing as one single vision of Canada towards the North American region. There were certainly different visions in Canada before the North America Free Trade Agreement was enacted, and there are certainly different visions of the trilateral relationship after NAFTA and with the new, not so new anymore, Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement, the CUSMA. Colin Robertson and I engaged in many discussions on different issues, but we both shared the same philosophy on integration, on the integration of North America. Colin knows my views. I have always believed and still do that an integrated North America is filled with opportunities. With regards to recent events in the Americas, I believe that even though the summit in Los Angeles registered some progress, I am more inclined to think that it was poor in planning by the host country and deviated from its original intent, which was to bring the nations closer together. In the particular case of Mexico, I have mixed feelings. I think President López Obrador's call for inclusion of others when he excluded himself from participating did not help anyone's cause. I believe his message would have been a lot louder and a lot stronger if he had showed up in Los Angeles. On the other hand, one of the things I do agree with Mexico's president was his strong call for the US government to fulfill some of its financial commitments towards the development of Central America. But again, a message that could have resonated much more if he had not just sent his foreign first minister. This is an issue where Canada and Mexico could and should push together for a much more aggressive approach. And I will address this issue a little further ahead. Canada and Mexico work well together in many fronts. With 77 years of diplomatic relations between them, the relationship has evolved. Trade and investment has seen strong growth. Canadians' trade and investment with Mexico is steadily growing, with over $36 billion in a two-way merchandise trade in 2020. Since signing our first trilateral trade agreement in 1994, three-way merchandise trade has grown over 250%. The agreement created the foundation to enter into the most modern and comprehensive trade agreement in the world in 2020. The United States, Mexico, and Canada generate close to 1/3 of global goods and services. The three countries are among each other's largest trading partners and sources of foreign investment. In 2019, total trilateral merchandise trade reached slightly over $1.1 trillion. Mexico has been identified as a priority market by EDC, that is, the Export Development Canada, which has operated a regional office in Mexico since 2000, providing extensive financial services related to Canadian exports and investments. Regrettably, Mexico chose to dismantle ProMéxico at the beginning of this administration, and this is the equivalent of EDC. This was the agency that had as a mandate identifying and bringing investment opportunities to Mexico. Canada and Mexico have also focused on collaboration with North America, working closely with the United States. Through mechanisms such as the North American Leaders Summit, the three countries work together in areas such as security, competitiveness, and the environment to create a more integrated, sustainable, and globally competitive North American economy. Colin Robertson has talked before about the four baskets in the Canadian relationship with the US. 1, trade, border, and investment. 2, energy, climate, and environment. 3, defense, security, and intelligence. And 4, the G7 and geopolitical issues. In some of these areas, we have seen incredible progress. The same thing could be said in terms of the North American region as a whole. After the nightmare years of the Trump presidency, we began to see some signs of optimism. For starters, the 2021 North American Leaders Summit was restored, which had not happened since June of 2016 when Canada hosted it. On this occasion, the three leaders, Biden, Trudeau, and López Obrador, reinforced the importance of strengthening the relationship among them. At the summit, the leaders spoke about shared priorities, including the fight against COVID-19, taking strong climate action, and building an economic recovery aimed at creating new jobs and middle-class growth. They agreed to work together to strengthen medical supply chains and advocate for increased global vaccine distribution, support North American transition to zero-emission vehicles, conserve 30% of North American land and waters by 2030, and increase opportunities for legal pathways for migrants to enter their respective countries. On this issue in particular, the commitments are there. Develop a regional compact on migration and protection for the Americas, promote pathways to labor mobility by committing to promote temporary seasonal worker visa, increasing industry education about the programs and their regulations, and expanding centralized migration resource centers in Central America. They also committed to announce additional programs and funding to create jobs in Latin America and the Caribbean. Dedicate additional assistance to address the root causes of irregular migration and forced displacement, and consider a trilateral development partnership between Mexico's AMEXID, Global Affairs Canada, and the U.S. Agency for International Development. Strengthen asylum systems and refugee resettlement programs to provide international protection for those fleeing persecution, with each country expected to make new commitments to take in more refugees. Improve capacity to identify human trafficking and other crimes, and create a trilateral migrant smuggling and human trafficking task force. In light of the recent events in San Antonio, where 51 migrants lost their lives, this issue becomes more important than ever. Now, where do I see areas of opportunity where Canada can play an important role for closer cooperation? In the areas of science and technology, cooperation is scattered all over with Canada and the US, but it's happening every day and in different fields. You can make the case that governments sometimes become obstacles to fluid cooperation between agencies in these areas. However, the current administration in Mexico might be taking things a little too far, not only by dismantling institutions, but by denying the benefits of a science-driven agenda for North America, emulating some of President Trump's policies. One of the things that came out from the Canada and the US bilateral meetings last year in the context of the Leaders Summit was their intent to begin negotiations towards a science, technology, and innovation agreement to position Canada and the US as leaders in the digital economy. This is something Mexico should have been a part of. Unfortunately, we were not. As a former ambassador of Mexico would say, either you can choose to be seated at the table with the grown-ups, or you can become part of the menu. But not everything is gloomy. Yesterday, I had the chance to listen to Alejandro Adam, the president of the National Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, give an outstanding presentation of science diplomacy for the UNAM Foundation as a tool to address global challenges such as food security, climate change, and public health, and as a source of soft power to strengthen and foster foreign relations. By the way, not everyone knows, but UNAM is responsible for 30% of Mexico's research. We have 23 research institutes and 5 research programs. Among these programs, a climate change research program, a food research program, a health research program, sustainability strategies program, and a space studies program. In all of these, there is incredible potential for regional cooperation. Mexico and Canada have to work harder toward a joint science and technology cooperation committee, such as the one that Canada has with the UK, Germany, South Korea, Japan, Brazil, and India. This is a particular area where the 3 countries could and should work closer together. Mexico can take advantage of UNAM's international presence in North America with its representations in Gatineau, in Canada, where you are, Gerardo, as well as its other 5 representations in the US. Not many people know, but UNAM has representation in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Antonio, Tucson, and Boston. Same thing could be said about our partners' presence in Mexico, such as the University of Calgary, which I know Colin has been very involved with. Another area where I see great potential for cooperation are student exchanges. During the inauguration of this series of bilateral dialogues, in our first roundtable, Ambassador Marta Bárcena shared the stage with former Ambassador Anthony Wayne. There, she referred to UNAM as a fundamental institution in Mexico's development and the bilateral relations, and made it clear that it is within academia where we should look for most transparency and the identification of problems, for that is the way it can help make best decisions, make better decisions, and this I thought was a very powerful statement. The U.S. Embassy representative, William Ostick, who was there at the inauguration of our bilateral dialogues, and who happens to be the Minister Counselor for Public Diplomacy, referred to the efforts by the current U.S. Ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, to find innovative mechanisms that will allow an increase in students and academics exchanges between our countries, which he recognized are very well below what one would expect from 2 neighbors and friends. Just recently, in a meeting we had with our director and someone from another university, we found out that of the 16,000 Mexican students that come to the US to study, only 40 come to Illinois, and the numbers keep decreasing. This is something we could also and should also address in a more consistent manner among the 3 countries. Just to put things in perspective, the US welcomes 350,000 Chinese students to the US. According to the Canadian Embassy, Canada hosted 14,435 Mexican students in 2021, an increase from over 10,000 students in 2020, which is pretty remarkable, and it's going in the right direction. Another area where I think progress can be made is in the environment, climate, an area where there is potential for great cooperation. I can attest, because I knew firsthand of ongoing initiatives, that there is plenty of cooperation between the 3 countries with the Environmental Cooperation Commission, which was created as a parallel agreement to the original North American Free Trade Agreement. The organizational dynamics with the CEC are functional and good example for cooperation. I know this because I did my master's dissertation on the issue. Of course, like everything in life, there is room for improvement. I do believe too that there are too many loose ends in terms of cooperation outside the agreement. There is not much of a regional approach when we talk about the impact of deforestation, for example. I know, for example, when I was there in Canada, Mexican firefighters played a very important role during fire seasons in Canada and the US. On the other hand, we have witnessed little to none criticism to deforestation of the Mexican Southern Peninsula when we talk about the Mayan Train. Now, with regards to the existing architecture, Canada and Mexico have become important strategic partners, and there is ongoing dialogue and engagement in many, many areas. Our collaborative efforts are pursued through a variety of means, ranging from periodic high-level consultations and interparliamentary meetings to more institutionalized mechanisms, such as the Canada-Mexico Partnership, the CMP. The CMP was established in 2004, and it aims to promote collaboration between the public and private sectors and operates through a series of working groups covering foreign policy, energy, agribusiness, creativity and culture, human capital, trade, investment and innovation, environment, mining, and forestry. Unfortunately, not all working groups in the CMP carry the same weight. You have the Commerce and Investment Group, the Agriculture, the Energy, Forestry, the Labor Mobility, but then you have others like, for example, the Education one, where there was a lot of overlapping between national and provincial legislation. In my experience, I think there is a lot of opportunity to work with subnational actors, particularly when, when there was a void that needed to be filled somehow when the North American Leaders Summit came to a halt during the Trump years. The Council of the Federation comprises all 13 provincial and territorial premiers. It enables premiers to work collaboratively, form closer ties, foster constructive relationships among governments, and show leadership on important issues that matter to everyone. During the nightmare years of the Trump presidency, I remember well Colin and I having extensive conversations about the need to engage our local officials and governors through the CONAGO and the National Governors Association in the US. We had some success, I have to say, in bringing more awareness for communication at the local level, but this needs to be much more formalized. The consulates are another area. If you have a good captain in the embassy in Washington, coordination with the different consulates becomes very smooth and dynamic. We have a network of 50 consulates in the US. Colin Robertson was a consul general in Los Angeles. He knows very well the importance of consulates. We have 50 in Mexico, in the US. That's an advantage that no other country has. Finally, I think that a good sign of optimism has to do with soft power. A good sign of optimism for cooperation among three countries is the World Cup scheduled for 2026. FIFA President Gianni Infantino conducted meetings recently with President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and with officials from the Mexican Football Federation, and things seem to be moving in the right direction. If I'm not mistaken, even the cities, the host cities have been appointed. Just to sum it up, in conclusion, I would say that in the political spectrum, Canada and Mexico seem to be less divided than our partners here in the US on the broad issue of integration within the North American region. Conservatives and liberals seem to be more in sync than Democrats and Republicans who favor Buy American policies. Same thing could be said about Mexico. With all the polarization and loud talk, it was under the governing party of Modera that the CUSMA was signed. And while there are irritants on the energy side and investment security side, they know and are very well aware of the benefits of free trade and could not afford to pull back. 27 years ago, I was presenting at the University of London my master's degree dissertation on the organizational dynamics of integration, a concept that was in the midst of gaining traction in North America. NAFTA was in its infant stages. Much of my research was based in contrasting the European experience, the bureaucracy, as some like to call it, with our new model. I had to immerse myself in the literature about the long and complicated path that Europe had to go through to achieve what it is today. That got me closer to giants like Lindbergh, Eisenstadt, Haas, and Weber. It was Walter Holstein, then the president of the EEC Commission, that said, and I quote, "We are not integrating economies, we are integrating policies. We are jointly building a new and bigger house," end of quote. Well, that beautiful house that took so many years to build today shows big cracks on the walls. And I'm afraid that on this side of the ocean, this house, the North American house, needs a very comprehensive and thorough cleaning. And I would leave it at that, Gerardo.
Alberto, thank you very much for this very interesting, I would say, a combination of a presentation and also a testimony of what you've experienced in your time in Canada, and of course also with a lot of hard facts about the relationship and how things are working between Canada and Mexico. maybe to prepare this final part of the presentation, and of course, we wish Colin a speedy recovery. We wish him well, and we're looking forward for an additional or an opportunity to meet with him and listen to what he has to say, because as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I truly believe, and I know it's also your case, and I'm guessing it's also Colin's feeling, when we talk about the relationship between Mexico and the United States, we need to also consider Canada. Canada has become a key factor, a key player in that relationship, and that's why we heard you all the time talk about a trilateral relationship, because that's what we've come to. That's what we have now. So maybe to prepare this final part of the presentation, and while we wait for maybe some questions from the public to come through, I would ask you to please summarize for us, Alberto, the opportunities that you see in order for Mexico and Canada to increase this relationship. Just if you can sum it up for us, please. I can help you with a couple. I was able to identify. And I'm pretty sure you'll understand why I got this as the top of my list. I was able to write down student and academic exchanges. Absolutely. You also mentioned environment and climate. And then, of course, the topic of integration, talking about trade integration and policies integration as well. Would you add some additional topics to that list, Alberto?
Well, Gerardo, thank you. And I think, thank you for writing those down. I think soft power is another one where we're pretty much in sync. I think both Mexico and Canada. Yesterday that I was listening to Alejandro Adem, who's a fascinating researcher. We need to contact these kind of people who can decipher each other's pathways on how the system works. Just as I was mentioning how important Colin Robertson was for me to do my job in getting me in contact with different stakeholders in different areas. For example, you are there in UNAM and you have a pretty new director too. I would recommend that you reach out to these people, and I know you're doing that. But these are the key stakeholders that can make a difference. These are the people that know the intríngulis, as we say in Spanish, the labyrinth on how to guide you through the different bureaucracies, because there's bureaucracies all over in different areas. On the science issue, science is science. I mean, science is an area where Canada is incredibly powerful, but it's a complicated system because the government supports with funding a lot of research, but then there's private, and that's one of the as a government official, and just like Marta, former Ambassador Marta said, I have the luxury of saying things now that, from the academic side. I don't have to be in the government side. I can say these things with much more freedom. I hit myself on the wall several times because we couldn't go farther, because we didn't know how to navigate in some of these seas of bureaucracy. So I had to make alliances with different stakeholders who would guide me, And another area of opportunity that I didn't mention much, but I think it's very important, is migration. Obviously, I talked, but I didn't talk much about one of the things that former Ambassador Suarez Davila, he insisted a lot on diversifying to migration. We have 32,000 migrants coming every year, and these are the people who come and pick up the harvest and feed Canadians and bring food to the table. And
you're talking about the seasonal agricultural worker program.
Exactly, the seasonal, which I think last year reached 32,000 people. which is amazing. I mean, and we tend to glorify this, like like it is a functional agreement, but there's a lot of that needs to be done there in terms of human rights. And I had the opportunity to go and visit these fellows who are amazing human beings who take 8 months of their life away from their families, and just work in small sheds under very, very harsh conditions. And so I think that's an area where Mexico should be pushing for a little more on the Canadian side, on to do more and better job of protecting these migrants who, again, bring food to the table of Canadians. In terms of diversity of migration, there's a potential, and this is where the university plays a very, very important role. I mean, engineering, for example, we are a world power in engineering at UNAM. There's an immense potential for engineers to work in different areas in different provinces. In Alberta, I know that they had a need for engineers. So we have to work on this kind of it's one of those areas, again, we have the federal government and provincial governments. It's difficult, but I think there's a lot of potential.
Now, I would certainly add to the list, Alberto, and I don't know if you will agree with me. And of course, I don't want this to sound like as an advertisement. I truly believe what I'm going to say. I would add to this list of opportunities for collaboration between Canada and Mexico something that you also mentioned during your presentation, which is the network of offices and schools that UNAM has all over North America. And of course, you mentioned all the satellite campuses that UNAM has in the US. And of course, we also have our own representation here in Canada in the National Capital Region of Canada, which is formed by the cities of Ottawa and Gatineau. And I'm talking about UNAM Canada, of course. How do you think both countries could or should benefit from the existence of this network and of course, more particularly about from the presence of UNAM in Canada?
Oh wow, that's just I think that's a wonderful question, because I think the potential is ad infinitum. It's endless. I remember arriving in Canada and getting to know one of the first person I got to know. One of the first people I was introduced to was Esperanza Garrido, who was the first director of UNAM Canada.
Yeah, she's the founder of UNAM Canada.
Exactly, and alumni of historian, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Art historian.
And this is just amazing. I mean, people like this, you can see them navigate so smoothly with different people in Canada. Yesterday that I was listening to Alejandro Adem, for example, when he was talking about the whole structure that Canada has on the science and the mapping of the science, they have the Mona Nemer, who's kind of like the advisors, the prime minister's main advisor on science and technology. We don't have that figure in Mexico. We have something. I know that because I met the guy when we needed to. But they're not doing the same things. We're not in sync with these people. That's where the universities, both our universities, our representations play very important roles in our areas of influence, as we call them, right? I know that you guys cover a lot of ground, because I remember when I was there, I would go to Montreal, where we have an outstanding Mexicans working on the space industry, and we have phenomenal people there,
and a very active consulate as well.
Very active consulate with Steven, and one of the challenges is to fight for. One of the challenges that we have as Mexicans and Canadians is who's going to keep the the knowledge. Canadians have this very clear in their heads. They want to bring migrants with doctorates or the super qualified, and they want to retain them because they know the importance for their economy. As Mexicans, I mean, we want our students to go abroad, but we also want them to contribute and give back to Mexico. We don't want just to stay and work in. Good for them, but I think that's one of the challenges that we have. I think we have to increase, but we have to be very vigilant on how we do this.
And of course, in this situation you were referring to, you mentioned also during your presentation that U.S. also felt that the level of academic exchange between Mexico and U.S. Was still not reaching the levels we should all expect, and I'm pretty sure it's more or less the same case between Mexico and Canada. So I wonder, in your opinion, how strong is the linguistic challenge that all three countries are facing? I mean, we all know that the official language in Mexico is Spanish, and of course we have all the First Nations languages, but it's Spanish, the business language in Mexico, along with English, but the official one is Spanish. And then in the United States we have a very interesting situation because we have the English, and at some parts in the U.S. I think Spanish has a very relevant role.
Absolutely.
But then we get to Canada, and we basically have English, and then some areas like Quebec, for example, where French is very, very important, more important than English, I would say. But it's hard to track or to identify the role of Spanish in Canada, for example. So what are your thoughts in terms of this linguistic challenge between the three countries?
I think we're moving in the right direction. It's a daunting task, but for example, the book that I referred to in my opening remarks, the compilation by Cezanne, they produced a couple of books there. The researchers, they were absolutely willing to do their own essays in Spanish. So that's progress. That's progress, because usually when you're asking for a compilation or for essays from researchers, they'll send you something in their native language, and then they'll tell you, like, you translate it. I don't care. But these guys made the effort. These Canadians made the effort to write it and write it in Spanish, and I think we're making progress, and that's why schools like UNAM in Canada, Gatineau, it's play very, very important roles. I talk a lot with my colleagues here in the U.S., my Anglo-Saxon friends, and I tell them, why don't you expand your world? That's what languages do. They expand your world. But the thing is that, there's people who are really narrow-minded. Like they say, like, oh, it's, or I think language learning, it's good. I mean, for people who are getting older like me, it keeps
like
you
us.
like us. It keeps you busy. It keeps you on top of things. One of the things when I was living in Canada, I had a struggle with French because I didn't speak French, and French is, the second main language there, right? And I needed
Ottawa, for example, is officially a bilingual city.
Exactly, and I needed to. I had francophone friends, and I needed to communicate. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I would do is immerse. Obviously, I took classes, but immerse myself in trying to get the phonetics and listen to the news in French. I would listen to the news in French all the time, and that's what I recommend to my friends here. Obviously, I tell them, I tell them like, come on, join UNAM, obviously. That's my first place to go to. But even if they don't want to, I tell them, you can be sitting in your living room, and we have amazing, amazing programs in UNAM where you can learn it. We have this Rincón UNAM. I don't know if you guys have the Rincón UNAM in there.
Rincón de Cultura?
Rincón de Cultura, exactly. Descarga Cultura, where you can just by código QR, or I don't know.
Just download a lot of resources.
You can download conferences and everything bilingual. So we have a lot of resources, and I would say to our audience before we close in, it's like I would invite everybody just to dive into our websites, yours and ours, and explore, all the opportunities that we have to offer.
Absolutely, Alberto. I completely agree with you. And any final remarks before we say goodbye, Alberto?
Well, I think we ran out of time, and I think we did pretty well, you and I, just chatting. And I just want to say that thank you very much, Gerardo. I really appreciate you being our moderator. I really feel bad that Colin Robertson couldn't join us. I wish him the best, a speedy recovery, and I'm sure we will do more things with him. He's a very willing fellow.
I think we're indebted to each other, and I really look forward for the opportunity of listening also to Colin. So if there is a chance, as we all wish, to have him on stage, please invite me, and I'll be very happy to work with both of you to close this chapter as it should be. Okay.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, Alberto. I really thank you for your time, for your thoughts. It's been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and have this exchange. And I hope this is not the last time we meet. And before we go, we have an announcement to make, and I'll just go ahead and switch to Spanish. This is something that we do very commonly here in Canada. We switch from one language to the other. So I'll just switch to Spanish, if I may, because the next round table will be in Spanish. So I'll just go ahead and switch to Spanish. Thank you very much, Alberto, again.
Thank you.
UNAM Chicago y el Centro de Investigaciones sobre América del Norte invitan a la sexta mesa del ciclo de Diálogos del Bicentenario de las Relaciones Diplomáticas de México-Estados Unidos. El 3 de agosto al mediodía de la Ciudad de México, la hora del centro, tanto en Estados Unidos como en Canadá, tendremos el diálogo Los desafíos migratorios en la relación bilateral. Participarán en dicha mesa Mónica Berea del CISAN e Iracema Coronado de la Arizona State University, y tendremos como moderador la participación de Guillermo Castillo del Instituto de Geografía de la UNAM. Los invitamos, están cordialmente invitadas e invitados, agosto 3 al mediodía, hora de la Ciudad de México y del centro de Estados Unidos y de Canadá. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup a tout le monde. Muchísimas gracias.